So good morning, everybody. As Sheffy noted, yes, DLD is not just, maybe sadly in these times, about optimism and possibilities, but it's about thinking and rethinking all the difficult questions of our time. And in that sense, I think in the Munich Security Conference, and I speak for my colleagues there, could not be happier to have this group of experts here. All of these three young people were at some point in their careers Munich young leaders. Now I sort of think of us as the real decision-making, younger, moving into middle-aged but still effective leaders. That would be too long for an acronym. But I'm really pleased to introduce these three people to you. To my immediate right is Sven Mikser. He is now a member of the European Parliament, effectively creating the bridge between the European Parliament and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that he's a delegate to that body in conjunction. But he is the former foreign minister and defense minister, not at the same time, clearly, of Estonia. And then in our middle is Zanda Kalniņa-Lukaševica, and she is the parliamentary state secretary in her country, the Republic of Latvia. She was, for a good amount of time, also the head of the Committee on European Affairs. She is the bridge function of her country to the EU Council and has just returned from Brussels, came in late last night. And all the way to my farther side is our colleague from Ukraine, Oleksii Riabchyn, who's the advisor to the CEO of Naftogaz, so could not be better centered in the issues that we want to discuss. And I think also critical for where we want to get in terms of the opportunity discussion, he's the former Deputy Minister of Energy and Environmental Protection, and he was a climate negotiator at the 2015 COP meeting. There you go. He is our climate man. So that's where we want to get into thinking about renewables and where the answers are. But of course, I want to start very expediently with the situation in which we find ourselves. The European Union is working on a sixth sanction package in cooperation, of course, with the United States. And as part of that, and core and linked to that, is the idea of an oil embargo. And Sven, I noted that, interestingly, Estonian talk shows are now translated into English. And Sven was on a program 2 days ago where he said, actually, on the difficult Hungarian question, there are levers, both political and diplomatic, which the European Union isn't yet fully exploiting. And I have some ideas what that could be, but I think we want to hear directly from you. So first of all, welcome, Sven. And we're interested in your views.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was said in one of the previous panels that Europe has been moving at an incredible speed. Obviously, I mean, the speed is only that incredible if you put the 0 hour in the early morning of the 24th of February. These unhealthy dependencies were built over a very long period of time. And I think the question is whether it's possible to cut them. I think that possible and painless are not synonyms. So it's painful, but it's possible and it's necessary. Political and diplomatic levers is essentially the same thing. I think that European leaders, especially those from the big and powerful countries, will have to deliver the message to the colleagues, to those colleagues who are blocking consensus on this sixth package, that it involves costs if they are going to engage in blackmail at this critical stage, because it's not a matter of convenience. It's not an issue of convenience. It's actually an existential crisis for Ukraine, obviously, but also in very many ways to Europe's security.
Well, I think this idea of getting through, I mean, I think you pointed out exactly what we have seen. It's true. We've seen an extraordinary unity within the European Union, but if this becomes a war of attrition, which is likely to become, there will be breakage points, and it begins possibly here. Zanda, you've just come back from Brussels and conversations that you've had there with colleagues. What is your read on how one might address Hungary, that's obviously within the European Union, saying, look, that we can only go so far. And Sven used the word blackmail, potentially attempting to blackmail the core of the EU. But then we have other partners, quote unquote, within the NATO construct that are also making things a little difficult when we think of longer term energy security issues like Turkey. Can you give us a readout of your conversations in Brussels right now as we move toward a pretty critical phase here in making these decisions?
Yeah, from my perspective, we should really have the decision urgently, and actually already yesterday. And for me, it's indeed a no-brainer, because it's not about a cheap or expensive gas or oil. It's about lives of innocent people. So whenever we want to say that Europe still is a union of values, and so this should be a no-brainer, even from economic perspective, and we can then count the costs of a day of war in Ukraine, in Europe, etc. When we talk about the situation where we have not reached the agreement yet, and I indeed hope that at the latest during the European Council meeting, the decision will be reached. I'm in a very difficult position right here on the stage, because Sven knows how it is that we are not commenting that directly the other member states, just to avoid the situation that a word creates a situation where it causes a disruption in the decision making. So I hope that after some lengthy discussions with Hungary, at the end of the day, we finally will reach the agreement. And we had this situation several times in the history of the EU, that lengthy discussions, but a good decision at the end of the day. Also, this time, we don't have an extra day, because every day costs lives. And that's the biggest problem. So I cannot understand how Hungary and the people of Hungary can, even if they accept Orban, can accept the situation that he delays the sanctions. Mm-hmm. So, and by that we really allow Russia to get money and to continue to finance its war machine. Because whenever we talk about the oil and gas flowing via pipes to Europe, actually it's about the flow of blood in Ukraine. So it's a very concrete choice actually between life and death. And we need to stop this. And so every month since the beginning of the war, Europe provided to Russia about 20 billion euros.
Right.
And that's exactly the cost of the war for Russia. So there are different estimates, and it says that approximately 20 billion euros it costs for Russia to continue the war on a monthly basis. So we are directly financing it until the moment we are stopping buying the oil and gas. And even the gas is maybe the hardest decision for Europe. Actually, the oil, that's very close, we are reaching this decision. It's a major money issue for Russia. Mm. So we just need to do that. And also, when the council meeting will come, as usually for the heads of states and governments, I hope that they will have this long-time approach, that they will lock themselves inside the room and will not come out without this decision.
I'll remind the audience, for those of you who haven't been paying attention to the minute negotiations, and these two first speakers have been extremely diplomatic, as their profession prescribes, at the kind of negotiations that are going on at the heart of the European Union, which is to say that the Commission President again enforced the idea that there could be different sorts of transfer payments taking out of the Renew EU funds. Of course, all of these things are aptly complicated by the fact that Hungary was already in a complex situation with its brethren within the European Union based on its infractions of the rule of law and their access to funds from some of the more flexible, and I completely agree with Sven, not only has the European Union shown remarkable resilience and flexibility throughout this horrific humanitarian and international crisis and international law law violation at its eastern border, but also, of course, as the result of the pandemic prevention. So what the EU is trying to do now is, for better or worse, because I think what Zanda has pointed out is vital, that it preserves its unity, but mostly that these sanctions and the oil embargo is effective, that they really try everything in the negotiation toolkit internally. So just so we're all aware, the kind of horse trading that's going on behind closed doors in Brussels. Alex, as you're looking at this, both from your expert perspective, and not only are we meeting in a morning, 7 a.m., when, of course, the Russians have just turned off gas to newest potential NATO member Finland, but has also decided that gas shall no longer run through Ukrainian territory. So as you're looking at what is happening in Brussels, what's your reaction, both gut and intellectual, in terms of speed, in terms of functionality? Is Europe doing enough on this issue?
I'm so impressed that a lot of people came not to listen to some, pleasant, interesting presentation, but to listen about the energy problem, and it's a big honor for me. Yes, indeed. Russia not only tried to cut off Finland, but they started to play with the gas transit in Ukraine. So they sent a letter to the company that I'm working in, Naftogaz. So we are the biggest oil and gas producer in Ukraine, and we are responsible for the transportation. So they sent a letter that they will not pay for the transit in the percentage they are not shipping the gas. So, to keep the story short, so we have two entry points from Russia to flow the gas through Ukraine to Europe, and one of them has been occupied 2 months ago. We did our best to maintain our obligation to Europe, although we are blamed by Ukrainians that we are still why are not turning up the top, and you just stop financing the Russian war machine. But we were asked by Germany, by Austria, by others to continue to do our obligation. So, but last week they started to intervene into the gas transportation system, started to ship the gas to the occupied territory and supply the gas to the industry. So they're trying to make the economy work there. And it means that we need to have our own gas shipped to Europe for that gas that they are trying to ship to the occupied territory, and it costs us around. It might cost us around 1 billion euro per year. So we said that it's force majeure. We are not able to control it. We're not able to do anything, and said you need to ship this amount of gas that you are willing to ship to Europe through the point that we are control. But Russia rejected to do this and said, we will not pay. So we will have this problem. And honestly saying, the war has started not 3 months ago. The war has started, 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I'm from Donbass. I used to born in Mariupol, in city that has been completely destroyed. And the property of my grandparents there was just being destroyed. We were happy to evacuate them to more safer place. I used to live all my life in Donetsk, and I spent 15 years doing my career in green politics, policy, and business. And for me, it's still, it's a long process. But even that, Putin planned this war long time ago, because he started this kind of energy intervention, for 20 years. I bet you remember all of this kind of gas transit dispute, the energy problem, since 2009 and pretty much before. So what they started to do, so they started to somehow discredit Ukrainian transit system, to have the obligation or moral obligation to build up the reverse pipeline called Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, South Stream. So blaming Ukrainians that we are stealing gas, that we are not reliable, to Europeans. So they corrupt a huge amount of high-level politicians here in Germany and all over the world. And it was with only one decision, to leave Ukraine without the transit, so make it more vulnerable, and to make Europe more vulnerable and more dependent from Russia. And I spent, a decade fighting with the Nord Stream 2, being a member of parliament, being a deputy minister, now working in Naftogaz. And I do hope that I won't spend, and Ukraine won't spend another decade persuading Europe to put sanctions and embargo to stop financing this war machine. Because, for us in Ukraine, it's look ridiculous when, people are dying. There are some kind of a 6 or 5 round of sanction. Like we hope it will be 6 and 7, which needs to be already prepared, and there are some talks. But like still like 20 million per day, like 200 million per day, shipped to Russia, and their economy is doing like more or less fine. Like it's stupid. And when we're speaking about kind of reconstruction of Ukraine, renew Ukraine, like with European money, yeah, we understand. But like it's Russia who started the war, so we have their frozen assets, and it's really complicated and ridiculous from the Ukrainian side. So like saying for the Baltic countries who are like really strong advocates, and in the end of the day, it's not Ukrainians who should be responsible for the, like Hungary's energy bills, GDP of Germany, or will be no Austrian. Like we care about war and our people are dying. But like now in this kind of discussion, we feel that we are responsible for much more stuff that we should not be responsible to.
Right. Well, as the American saying would be, freedom is not free. And I think the Europeans are obviously learning that the hard way, but I thank you for giving us that real impression of the challenges, because again, I'll remind the audience that obviously the Ukrainian GDP, the Ukrainian economy has contracted in just obviously remarkable and painful ways, with a deficit, Oleksii will correct me, $8 billion. The Ukrainian deficit currently.
So yeah, like we have like the deficit like 5 billion per month, something like this. For example, like Mariupol, like the city with this industry gave us like from 10 to 15% of our GDP as a port, as a metallurgical industry. So definitely the economy is not doing really great.
So,
like we're trying our best, but it's really hard to rebuild it to the war condition.
Well, and port and transportation and infrastructure, I mean, there are many issues that we're going to have to deal with in the rebuilding phase, but now it's really about sustaining your country in upholding this fight, because as the German Chancellor reminded us in his address to Parliament 2 days ago, the current common objective of the European Union, the transatlantic, but also including what we're now calling the liberal alliance effectively, is that Russia cannot win this war. Sven, the Baltics have, in fact, leaned into a lot of these supply issues. The Baltic Connector, really trying to ensure what they can and do what they can. But it's arguably, at least in the calculations, not going to be enough. What kind of allyship are you finding in really tackling the first of all, the energy flow issues, oil, and then we'll talk about gas in a second. But how is Europe really thinking about stepping up their sourcing of key energy issues?
Well, I think that conceptually we figured out a long time ago that we need to diversify both the suppliers as well as the supply routes and switch to renewables. When it comes to this wake-up call, I'm getting tired of this sort of everyone saying that this should be the wake-up call, because we've had so many of them. And people are now saying that, well, no one could foresee it. Actually, it's not entirely true, because many people warned against these unhealthy dependencies when Nord Stream 2 was constructed, but even when Nord Stream 1 was being built. And I remember telling my, for example, German interlocutors, German colleagues, that well, this is dangerous, it's immoral, it's not even clean, because, I mean, it may be relatively clean at the point where you burn it in your furnace, but when you take into account the extraction, what goes into that, the flaring that happens in Russia, everything, I mean, it's not that clean at all. But the response usually was that, well, we look at this as purely a commercial undertaking. And it's like saying that, well, we prefer to look at nuclear explosion just as a sort of nice mushroom-shaped cloud. I mean, you cannot do that. So it's, I mean, we could foresee it. It's immoral, because now Russia supports its war effort with the money that it receives from us, essentially. It's not even clean, but it's also dangerous when you look into the future. The goal goal of the sanctions is not just to put pressure on Russia to end this war. This is the main goal right now. But I think I agree with Ursula von der Leyen and many others who have said that actually strategically the goal of the free world should be to weaken Russian industrial potential, to weaken Russian economy, at least until it deals with its own history, deals with its own crimes, and owns up to the crimes and takes responsibility. Because one of the problems is that Russia has never had this sort of moment of reckoning. It's always we have always collectively let it off the hook, and that's a huge mistake. So I mean, from the energy perspective, yes, we have identified being too dependent on Russia as a strategic vulnerability, as a security issue long ago. It's not just sort of economic issue for us, and that's therefore we have decided that, well, costly as it is, we have to do it. And I think that Europe collectively should approach it very much the same way. If we just say that, well, we have to sort of wait against the alternative, look at the alternatives, look at the price, look at the whatever transformation needs to be done, I think it's only part of that. We need to look at it as a security issue. We had a panel, a very good panel on the future of democracy, and I think that actually it's a huge threat of democracy globally if we just look at Russian oil and gas and leverage that Russian leadership has via that oil and gas over our democracies.
So the power of petrostates over our democracies when we're in this transition moment. Zanda, you, through both your work in the EU Affairs Committee at home, but then looking out to Brussels and beyond, Sven mentioned different areas of sourcing. Of course, we're looking to Turkey now. Spain cut a deal or was negotiating a deal on gas issues with Algeria, and then immediately it brought up other geopolitical issues around Western Sahara. I mean, Sven's point, I think, is exceptionally well taken, is that for too long, certain key countries in the European Union tried to segment energy questions, economic questions, separate them from a geopolitical reality in which we find ourselves. Clearly, that's no longer possible. The transition that we've now planned and put into different plans for the European Union on how we get to the renewables part are ambitious, they're lofty, but of course, in that sense, that is the turning point, because things now have to happen fast. What we're seeing instead, and Sven mentioned the flare-ups and the flaring, is we're burning coal at an unbelievable rate, and we're not really fully looking into the world when we're beginning to source from other places in terms, or at least it seems that way, what other geopolitical consequences might lie behind our hunger for energy. So as you are negotiating and looking, and the Baltics have been very effective at doing early warning for the entire European Union, what do you see, I mean, beyond as we're thinking about other sourcing, interim sourcing, as we get to our renewable goals, where are the dangers and where are the opportunities that you're seeing as we're looking out into the world in terms of where our supplies could come from?
Yeah, indeed, Baltics have warned the rest of the Europe for years, and I couldn't be more happy if we would have been wrong, but unfortunately we were not wrong. So we were preparing for the situation, and I think that the Baltic approach was first of all like really forward-looking and preparing for the worst-case scenario. So it involved building new connections, interconnections, pipelines, LNG terminals, so to be able to safeguard our energy security without Russia, and we are almost at the point. So, and it means that also the rest of the Europe have to prepare it quickly, and with the situation today where the Russians cut the gas supply to Finland, that shows us clearly that it's not only always can be on our side to decide when to stop to buy the oil or gas. We have to be ready also for the situation when Russia can stop it just in one day, in 1 hour. And then all the talks about the economics will just crash. So, that's why, for example, the EU Energy Union was launched back in 2015 with the so-called Riga process during the Latvian EU presidency. And I remember clearly that we were facing a lot of questions. Why is it needed? Why are you talking about that? Exactly because of the situation we are right now here. So what can we do? I think quite a good answer is provided also by the European Commission this Wednesday with this so-called Re-Energize Europe, or what was the right acronym for it again. The European Commission proposes 3+1 lines of action. So the one is really urgently look for alternative sources of fossil fuels. So it's LNG, it's buying gas from America, from Gulf countries and all around the world. It's also looking for other sources of oil, etc. The other line of action is, again, urgently going more green. So green energy sources, wind, soil, etc. Like in Latvia, we are going to build wind parks this summer enormously, much more than we did also in previous years. And the third aspect is cutting our energy consumption. And for example, we are used to have like plus 22 in our flats during the winter. And indeed, decreasing for even 1 or 2 degrees to 20, we will still feel comfortable enough. But that will save a lot of lives in Ukraine and elsewhere. And this additional +1 aspect is building a lot of new infrastructure that is really desperately needed, like new LNG terminals and new interconnectors to connect all EU countries in the same network, both for oil, gas, and also for electricity, because still there are some interruptions right now. So there is what we can do. And indeed, I fully agree, and that's exactly my point, that we cannot separate the idea of buying or not buying fossil fuels from Russia, like an energy topic, from the economics and from the security. It's all together. So our energy independence is exactly the security of our economies. And that's the security of ourselves and of our neighborhood.
So now let me just ask you a follow-up before I get to Alex again. Does the European Union, and specifically its foreign policy arm, have enough foresight to see what other geopolitical issues are afoot via the energy brief? I mean, Turkey's playing potentially with fire with respect to its blocking of Finland and Sweden's membership in NATO, ostensibly on the Kurdish issue, but there could be other things packaged in that, and we're going to speculate here. There seems to be a lot of countries interested in excising value and getting other things from either the European Union or from NATO around the fact that we are now in this energy dilemma. Do we have enough foresight, and we might talk about China as well, China that's buying Russian energy at discount prices very happily, I think, until secondary sanctions might apply and become painful. Do we have enough of a holistic view of the world in terms of how these short-term actions that we now have to take? Okay, I'm going to go to Eric first, because he's Sven first. Sorry, because he's got a point.
I think it's a very good question, because not necessarily. I mean, we are not that good at seeing all the potential consequences. Today we are talking a lot about imminent food crisis, in big part because of Ukraine's inability to export its grain via its ports. The last time we spoke about food crisis in the world was just before the Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers went down,
right.
Around 2007.
Yeah.
The consumer confidence was very high, but there was a huge food shortages. And in big part because at that time we tried to resolve our energy issues by resorting to biofuels. And we took out a lot of agricultural land from food production and gave it to producing biofuels and bioethanol and biodiesel. So, I mean, we have to be much better than we have been historically in seeing those sort of unexpected consequences of our actions.
Zanda, do you have a point on that? I mean, how good are we at the foresight thinking? I mean, because I think Sven's point is well taken. We've been replaying this playbook a couple of times, just with different spins, and now with a major crisis in our midst.
I think that the data are on our table. The forecasts are on our table, and the knowledge is in the room. So the question is about the willingness to take the decisions needed. So if Europe will really stick together and will be absolutely united, then we can deal with it and also overcome this blackmail or have really also a negotiating power. What sometimes is our weakness, that there is a one or two member states who are trying to get some benefit from themselves, and by that causing some cracks in the EU unity for a while, and that allowing the other players to think that they can press the EU for something more. So we should understand that any delays of the decisions, of the actions, actually costs more for all of us. And so, as I mentioned, the knowledge is there, but the will need to be accumulated.
As Ukraine looks out into the world in terms of its partnerships, particularly on the energy piece, but we've already addressed the need that Ukraine will have for rebuilding. I mean, are you starting to make decisions between partners? Of course, the United States had an easier gambit on the energy piece, always has, because, of course, the much vaunted American energy independence on the back of non-renewables. Let's call a spade a spade. But how do you think about that, the energy future of the country now? I mean, do you even have the breathing space to think that far, or are you just completely dominated by the day-to-day, Oleksii?
Good question, because it's related to my activity. Because prior to the war, I was responsible for the transformation of the biggest oil and gas company of Ukraine to more greener pathway, the same way as Shell, Chevron, Eni, and others doing. So we had aimed to be the biggest national producer of hydrogen. We were responsible for the biofuel to switch from the gas to bio. So I was engaged with numerous German business communication, US, so we had a huge and ambitious plan to do the climate neutral country by 2060. We were dealing with the Green Deal, with a lot of this kind of stuff. Currently, for 1 month, the plan has been completely stopped. And I was a bit even afraid that because of the war and because of the dependency and the high cost of the Russian fossil fuel, Europe will even take the money out of a Green Deal and put it more on buying more or kind of social welfare to compensate the tariff. But it's vice versa, because I see that the Green made another push. So not only a Greta Thunberg style, but also about the energy security. So this is even stuff that dominates the discourse in Europe. And after 1 month of the war, I started to receive a call from a company that we started to do a business in Ukraine and even in Europe, saying let's do something. We understand that the east of the country is problematic, but do something in the center of the country, in the west of the country, somewhere around Odessa. So we understand that it's not about the construction side, but we can do bureaucracy. We can try to do some fun. So a lot of green projects in Ukraine are still ongoing, and what we envisage. So Ukraine was underinvested, and we lost 2 or 3 cycles of technical innovation. So we will be able to leapfrog with those Marshall Plan and other stuff that will be definitely after the war. And for example, if we're speaking about Mariupol, of course it's about the security first, so we need to finish the war. So we're care now about the emergency needs, and if we envisage how we will rebuild our country. For example, if you take Mariupol, there had been a metallurgical plant with 19th century technology. And already prior to the war, the owner of the factory thought about the hydrogen metallurgical plant, and now it's completely destroyed, and it will be hydrogen. So Ukrainian, we envisage ourselves Norway for the EV innovator. So we envisage ourselves as a kind of innovation hub for a lot of companies. I know there are a lot of CEOs and doing a lot of businesses. After the end of the war, definitely we will receive huge amount of money, huge amount of investment. Of course, it's up for us to do the transparency, to do all of our home tasks, anti-corruption, etc., etc. Yep. When people speaking about corruption in Ukraine, I remind myself about Gerhard Schroeder or some other top corrupted politicians worldwide, and we have our own problems.
A spade. I think that's
yeah,
valid.
we have our own problems, but like believe me, Romania, which is a member of European Union, spent 10 years, for building anti-corruption entities, and received huge amount of money even without them. So, I was engaged as a politician in numerous this kind of conversation, and with this finger, I voted for every single Euro integration law, which means that Ukrainians could travel visa-free to Europe, and I did a huge amount of stuff. So we will do our home task. We know this for sure, but why I'm so emotional, because often we were not being member of NATO or received some kind of a NATO membership action plan or EU accession plan. You're corruptive, you have oligarchs, etc. Do your home task. Come on, guys. It's either you with us or you find some reasons not to take us to the civilized country. But I guess that Ukrainians, by fighting for the democracy, by dying for the democracy, by protecting European values, we receive our right to be in the civilized world. And this, the Iron Curtain that used to be, on the German border, then it moved to, eastern flank. Now it's on the Ukrainian side. And we do hope that we will move it towards Russia. There will be Iron Curtain there because it's not trusted country. You cannot make business with them. They could, they're not respecting the contract that we see with Finland with another. So we do hope that we will be there and we will be rebuilding our country and everything will be okay. And we are now doing this.
You very, very, I think, movingly underlined the blood sacrifice. And also, as befitting to DLD, the opportunities that will exist, I think, in Ukraine and for Ukraine's purpose. And there are plenty of innovators and entrepreneurs in this audience who I'm sure will want to help in this endeavor. I want to see if there are a couple of questions in this audience so that we can maybe take a quick speed round of questions. We have about 5 minutes left. We're going to start over there. I have one more question for the panel. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Philip Gerbert here from Unternehmertum. I wonder whether we could extend the historic perspective a little bit, because everything starts here at 2008, I have to believe. And if you recall, Siberian Russian gas was actually only made accessible by German technology in the 50s. Adenauer started it, Mannesmann built it, all the lines are built, all the pipelines were built by German companies. The Americans were furious. And ultimately, it was the lesser of two evils, if I may say, because if you think of what then happened, the oil crisis, you think, it's not the first war we have. We had tons and tons and tons of wars in the Middle East, which would have been the alternative, right? So I just wonder, so obviously there is a thing to say, it has been a rather stable relationship for a long time. And my sense is a little bit, strategically, this war is totally horrible, but it doesn't make any sense to anybody except for one person in this world. So my question is, what's your idea of how we could ever get out of this? And there's all this question, how much can we destroy? Because it wouldn't be the ideal world to have an Iron Curtain just further east. If you think, if you could take out one or two people, you might have a completely different vision for getting out of that. Any idea of that, how that, because they're not, warning, everyone says, we've been warning you, yes, you have warned totally, but people have warned about the Middle East, people have warned about atomic energy, people have warned about lots of things, and they were all right, Fukushima happened, what in the Middle East happened, and so on.
Okay.
So where is the solution going forward?
Well, the very easy and short question at the end. We'll take it down the line of the panel, but it's the future world order question around energy, Sven.
I don't want to make predictions about the future world order. I hope that the rules-based multilateral order will somehow persist, even though it's under a lot of strain right now. I think what sets Russia apart from these other countries is the fact that it's a nuclear power. It sits with a veto power at the UN Security Council, and its relationship to Europe is very different from those that of the Middle Eastern countries. And there has been considerably more wishful thinking among European politicians when it comes to Russia Russia. We have falsely interpreted it as a sort of aspiring democracy, which it never was. We never made the same mistake about, for example, Saudi Arabia. So I think that we have to do our own reflection here quite a bit. And I think the critical question is when Russia, essentially what it takes is a denazification of Russia, a sort of Nuremberg. I mean, short of that, I think we cannot go back to anything resembling business as usual. When it comes to energy, for example, I think that, well, Ukraine used to get a lot of its oil from Russia and Belarus via pipelines. These routes, now it will have to rearrange the whole logistics. Its own domestic refining capability has been hit. So when we are thinking about, when we are talking about the pain that Europe takes by looking at for alternatives, I think the real pain, even when you forget about the casualties, the people dying, even in the energy sector, the real pain is taken by Ukraine. So I think that we have to take that into account as well.
Zanda.
I think, unfortunately, this is a war that cannot be stopped with diplomatic means or by any phone calls. There is only one solution, so that Ukraine wins the war, that we help Ukraine to win the war. And unfortunately, we need to destroy Russian economy so that Russia cannot finance single day of the war today, and that it cannot afford to start any new conflicts in the years to come. And so that would give Russia a present of time to rethink what they have done, to understand what they have done, and come to a conclusions. And only that situation can bring security in Europe again.
I'll reinsert myself only to say that will require intense diplomacy with those who are not yet, quote unquote, on that side and in that view, including China, India, and others. So Europe has yet more homework to do with its partner, with the United States. Oleksii, on this question.
Yeah, this denazification of Russia really a great issue, but like the history. Like we are now writing a history book. Like exactly right now, I never thought in my life that like my region, like Donetsk, and like I'm 39, so for like almost like 10 years, I'm spending, writing a history book, not only Ukrainian, but like the world history book. And we require leadership. So basically, we need new Churchills, etc., because those national leaders who are weak, they will be written in a history book as a weak leaders. And it will be about generation. So this conflict will be studied at schools. And like we in Ukraine have a like super consensus that we will fight till the end. We will fight till the victory. Like we will be on the battlefield and no one will stop us. We hear something about you need to sacrifice some territory to Putin to sign some document. Like it will never happen. We listen to some plans in different member states or like different diplomatic solution. It will never happen. So we will be fighting. We will be fighting until we will restore at least for the 24th of February territory, and we can negotiate some kind of other stuff on Donbas and Crimea, but never we will succeed our territory. Like we will be fighting. Thank you for support and sending like weapon for our army. It's really help us to go forward. Thank you.
Freedom is not free. It will cost all of us great sacrifices, not least in redesigning the way that we consume our economies, which is through the lifeblood and life string of energy. Please join me in thanking my formidable panel.
Thank you, Cathryn.